Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing as well as you can be. And I apologize that for the inconsistencies in the back half of this year. I have been spreading myself pretty thin between all of my various creative, professional, and social obligations. I will resolve to be much better about that. And I'm actually recording this from my new setup on my couch, holding the microphone like I'm doing stand-up, which is how Chelsea and I have started recording the Hallmark After Show podcast. It's a lot more free and conversational. I see lots of podcasters on YouTube that do this. I've always been kind of old school in my mentality of wanting the microphone boom arm, but I'm doing it this way, and quite frankly, I feel it makes me feel a little bit different, especially as I've been digesting the world the last couple of weeks. I'm sure you can tell by the tone of my voice that I am not thrilled with the outcome of the election, but I'm also, sadly, I wish I could say I'm surprised, but I'm not. I'm just angry that my gut instinct was right, and kind of annoyed that we're gonna have to do this again, because regardless of how you might be thinking about the previous Trump administration and how well things were going, I don't remember it that fondly. I remember it ending with me trapped in my house for several months, going on to several years, and I have never discussed the thing that has stuck in my head as like a perplexing notion. They're much more like learned political types that are dissecting the greater, the broader implications of why he won. The thing I have stuck on is that suddenly in the year 2024, everybody is just faced with sheer devastation over the price of eggs. I have never discussed the price of eggs with anyone in either a professional, social, casual situation, be it acquaintance, family member, random person on the street. The topic of eggs and how much they cost is just not a part of my life, nor are eggs a big part of any social interaction that I have been a part of. I am not going over to people's houses, and I'm not going to parties where the fluctuation of the price of eggs has diminished my experience of said event. But suddenly, in 2024, that becomes a symbol. The incredible edible egg becomes a symbol of what people are willing to overlook because to get the most slight fringe kind of benefit. And honestly, I will be expecting in our upcoming era of autocratic economic prosperity, I expect to be offered eggs or egg-related items at everything that I go to. I want to see eggs on menus. I want to see eggs at people's houses. I expect eggs in some form passed around at any kind of social gathering, because this is what you say you want. So if that's what you say you want, then I expect you to stand behind it. That's just where I'm at personally, in my sort of like annoyed sort of indignity is indignation is where I'm at and have been the last few weeks. But I have been directing that anger into weightlifting at the gym. I've been trying to be more active, trying to be more physically active, because I would like to fit an airplane. I would like to fit in airplane seats more comfortably. I'd like 2X shirts to fit. I would like to be able to walk a big flights of stairs and not get winded. I'm starting to see some slight gains in that end part of, to bring this full circle, part of how I'm trying to eat better is I have started making scrambled eggs. But honestly, not. I've been doing fine, folks. Where I'm at, maybe they're falling off the back of a truck and luckily not getting cracked. But where I'm at here in the city, eggs are not breaking me, and that is apparently a very fortunate position to be in. But that's where I've been. That's how I have been That's how I've been coping, like emotionally. I intend not to despair, not to wallow. I intend to stay plugged in, to be informed, and to learn more. That is how I will be getting through this next round two electric boogaloo of a Trump administration. That's where I'm going to be mentally, and we'll see. I intend to stay the path. I will also be. I will let you guys know. I will be, as much as I will try to be better about doing more episodes of this podcast, I will be traveling soon. But folks, you can of course look forward to my friend Paul Cohen returning to the podcast for his regular December pop punk roundup. We are definitely going to be doing that, and that's something I also look forward to every time around this time of year. So I'll be looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to sharing my conversation with you today. My guest on the show today is Slaney Rose Jordan. Slaney's a comedic actor, and she's also a technician at the Peoples Improv Theater. That's how we met. Usually I would be teching a show right before or after one that she would be working on. So we usually see each other in passing as we move out of the tech booth so that the other can go in. I've also worked with her as a performer multiple times with Backdoor Barbecue and as a director. And I've known her for a while, but I haven't really ever sat and had a long conversation. And so this was our first time getting to do that. And I thought, and honestly, I had a really nice time chatting with Slaney. So this is going to be a fun one. This was also as a first post-election podcast. This was a nice sort of like return to how I started doing Between Awesome and Disaster, which is talking to peers about comedy and things that we love. We talked about current events off the mic, but the conversation itself is very focused on kind of like the art of being funny and sort of like the behind the scenes of what goes into making the show happen from the person in the booth behind the lights and computer. So thank you all again so much for being here, and let's talk to Slaney. I'm doing a slightly different setup than I usually do when I record Between Awesome and Disaster, because usually I have like a mic boom stand arm and I'm at my desk, but I'm doing my Christmas podcast right now with Chelsea, so I'm on my couch doing the like call her daddy kind of like sit in a big comfy chair and record, and I feel like it does change the vibe of your conversations.
Right? Yeah, being more upright or being less upright.
Well, I'm very like particular about podcasting, because when I see like videos of people just sitting on a couch or like leaning way back like this, and the boom arm has to do a lot of work, I'm like, how much effort can you be putting into this conversation?
Yeah.
So
I should have grabbed my mic. I've got a mic. But can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine, Slaney. Who I feel like we've known each other for a little bit of time now in like the Pit improv circles, because the Pit sort of became my next third place after the loss of the Creek and the Cave to Texas.
Yeah. Oh, they went to Texas? I didn't know that.
Yeah, when the New York location closed, the owner moved and they reopened in Austin and have
Oh.
been doing really well from what I've heard.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I did. I liked going out to Long Island City. That was not, that was like a fun little adventure out there.
Hmm. Did you ever do like shows at the Creek? I know they did some kind of sketch and improv stuff for a little while.
Yeah, mostly improv, but yeah, every so often people would have an odd show that they'd invite like a group of mine to go. When I was doing Lazy Fair,
Hmm.
it was an improv group that we were rehearsing even like every week up until we were a practice group, but we would produce shows and stuff. But we were consistently rehearsing every week up until the week before lockdown, like, or
Wow.
the week of lockdown. Yeah. So that killed it though, because then we all went off and, had made lives, gave
Hmm.
our, like, did something with our lives, except for
Yeah.
me.
You're doing stuff with your life. You're a
I know.
vital asset to the pit community. Like I feel like every
Oh,
time I'm
thanks.
either whenever I'm like rolling in to text something, be it like Sketchfest, Backdoor Barbecue, Love Is Live, I feel like you're usually either coming in like right after me to do one, or I'm seeing you, or I'm like oh hey Slaney, how was the show? Great, cool. I'll go
We're
get
like
into the booth
two,
now.
yeah, we're like two ships passing in the night.
Exactly, and I feel like a certain level of camaraderie with the few other techs that I do know at the pit, where I'm just sort of like we make it happen.
Same. Yeah, it's the handoff, we like
Hmm.
the heart of the pit is really up in the booth, right?
I like to think so. I always take a little selfie with the follow the fear sign before we dive into things, and I feel
Cute.
like. And I feel like you probably feel similar to this, even though I don't really get on stage in any of the groups I work with or tech much. I am always excited when I get some voiceover lines. I love when that happens. But I approach doing the tech for shows with the same like level of preparation and thought that I think the performers put into doing the sketches, because when we do tech rehearsals, I like thinking of, oh, this would be a funny song for to punctuate this, or getting the timing of like sound effects sometimes can make the whole
Same.
sketch.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I pride myself that way as well. Like, coming from a improv and sketch background as a performer, like
Hmm.
being left hanging on a blackout is the worst feeling, because you've done
Right.
all this effort on stage to get them to laugh, and then the final payout has just this like deflated thing that you're like, no, you know? But
Yeah.
like, not like it ruins a sketch, but it's like I want to get their back so hard that it's like the best, like tightest sketch that they can ever do, because I know that, like, especially with sketch, you spend at least a month preparing,
Yeah.
writing, rehearsing, putting it up on its feet, and like, and memorizing it, and like getting props and all this stuff, that like the last thing you want to happen is like something that, because like the tech missed a beat or missed a cue, or
Yeah.
like, so I'm very diligent in my note taking during tech rehearsals. I'll like write it
Hmm.
in the margins and stuff, and treat it like a performance. And actually, it's funny, when we came back from the pandemic, people started calling, um they would use tech, like, I don't know if it was me that necessarily started this, but I was encouraging improv shows to get creative with their lighting,
Uh-huh.
right? Through just kind of like play and like setting scenes. Like, why not be theatrical with improv?
Hmm.
And then it kind of started a trend of like hiring a technical improviser. So they would call them like technical improvisers. And so now that's kind of what I do with a lot of the shows there, with like Baldwin's and The Awakening.
Yeah.
I'll go in and like kind of be a like a third hand in the magic of it all,
Hmm.
outside of just lights up, lights down. I'll like kind of call back to like a moment that, or a setting that they had established, so that the audience also can kind of follow it as well. And I try
Yeah.
not to like lead too much in improv, but like I'll just kind of follow and be a part of the group, which is really, it's really fun, and it's sweet that improvisers embraced that, because I think it adds so much. Like, oh, and Kyle Shamblin too. He's great. Like he added a whole soundboard and stuff, and like adding that just helps like unexpected things to happen, and then it creates this sense of play that's really fun for improv.
Exactly, because so much of improv is them having to react not only to each other and like yes and, but also to like interact with the environment. So like if you can help like facilitate that, I find that just adds, like you were saying, another depth to just like a what could be just more of like a regular kind of improv show.
Yeah.
I remember reading an article in the New York Times about the lighting designer for the band Fish,
Yeah.
because lots of bands, all of their light cues, they all perform to click track now, and a lot of bands have backing tracks, so you kind of have like a show that runs while
Hmm.
the concert happens. But Fish's lighting guy does not do that. He's actually like tweaking the knobs and doing the faders and doing all the things,
Yeah.
because Fish just will like, okay, well, let's do like a 38-minute like jazz improvisation. He's like,
Yeah.
and he's just like, okay, well, let's do this on the. To me, that makes it a much more. It kind of harkens back to what I've always kind of, when I was like studying theater in high school, like how design actually happened. Like I feel, and this is my angry man yelling at the cloud kind of thing. But when it gets like too automated and you can just like hit a button and the whole thing runs, that's not exciting to
No.
me.
Me too, and I see it when I'm in the audience, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that was an automatic fade out, like, great," but the tact of, like, being in a manual position of lighting, like,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing it even, like, because sometimes people will there will be a moment, and like it will be close to blackout, but the live performance, they'll add something, like that was unexpected,
Yeah.
and you can bring the lights back up, so like that would have been lost if it was pre-programmed, and like so
Mm-hmm.
you're more interactive. It's more of like an immersive kind of experience, you know what I mean? But it's funny that you mentioned the fish. Well, here we go. It's funny that you mentioned the fish lighting designer, because my one of my friends from college is good friends with him. He's a lighting designer as well,
Oh yeah. Oh
for
cool.
like Tedeschi trucks, and he's been kind of I'm pretty sure an assistant to the lighting designer for Fish, but
Gotcha. The like jean jacket, bearded glasses fan base, kind of
so
those bands.
yeah, he's like, I mean, he grew up on like Dave Matthews Band and stuff, he's like
Yeah.
he's a
Uh-huh.
a Massachusetts guy, but anyway, we like we met up after the pandemic. We like, broke out of our lockdown and went to a Grateful Dead cover band show at Brooklyn Bowl, the Grateful
Nice.
Shred. And it turns out he had gotten LSD from the lighting designer. And it's like the lighting designer of Fish. And it's supposed to be like the best LSD out there, like the
Oh
best stuff.
yeah.
So I ended up getting to experience that
Rad.
from him. Yeah, and it was awesome.
That's
It
what
was my first time, and it was really like the perfect situation, because also someone who appreciates light when you're like, you know, tripping.
no, no, totally.
You're like, but we were both just like, look at whoa, and like Brooklyn Bowl has this huge disco ball, and so
Yes.
it was just a gorgeous night. I love light, like I mean, outside of tripping,
Uh-huh.
I also really just love to play with light on stage. I think it's really, it can add so much of an effect.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to do. Like when I was like a high school theater kid, and like I like everyone else, most was trying to be an actor and wanted to be on stage. But for like the you got to take some tech stuff so you can appreciate all the hard work that goes into it. I gravitated to lighting design. That to me was the
Mm,
most creative and exciting thing, was like putting like, oh, all red lights or all blue lights, all of, because that to me like really helps create atmosphere. Like obviously
yeah,
design and costumes are important, but I feel like as much as you're able to take somebody, give the audience the impression that they're not just watching something happening on a stage, light does a lot to
yeah,
creating that vibe and that atmosphere, along with
Yeah.
music, of course, as well. I'd love to
Yeah.
ask you this: how long have you been doing tech at the Pit?
I started it when I went in 2021 when we came back from
Okay.
the pandemic. Because I was producing for Old School Sketch Show, and we that's like a show that's made in 7 days, a sketch show made in 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, being in the room for those 7 days was helpful. Like so I found that having a tech that was in the room
Mm-hmm.
before the show, and knew the show, it just helped the whole process, come together
Yes.
with such short turnaround. So I just trained myself on QLab and on the boards and stuff, and became that at like so that also we could save money and pay our artists, and
Mm-hmm.
um, it was just kind of like a something new for me to learn, like I was kind of itching to learn a new skill. I like to learn new skills when I can. So
Mm-hmm.
that was like next on the list. And it just kind of worked out that we were coming back from the pandemic and kind of needed it.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
then, yeah, and then people really liked what I do and how I work. So they started hiring me, and it's become like a part-time job for the most part. Like sometimes it feels like a full-time job because I'm
Mm-hmm.
there all the time and it's a lot of hours, but it's like so enjoyable. It's such a big payoff. I get to watch all this comedy and sketch comedy and learn, and it feels like a blur. Like it's really hard for me to, I'll be honest, it's really hard for me to learn, put names and people and attach them to a specific project they're working on, because it's like such a pool of artists that come in and
Yeah.
out, that like they're all doing it with other people, and it's like, what was that show? Oh yeah, it's like all kind of a blur to me. But it's so great. I love
Yeah.
it. How about
That's very different for from how I got into it.
Yeah, did you start in college? Like did you get educated that way?
Um, well, to do stuff at the Pit, I think it was in 2016. In 2016, I was looking for. This was before I had my current day job, so I needed some like a side gig, and I was looking for something that I could enjoy. So I just emailed like the general Pit email, and then Ronnie, the old guy who used to the
Oh
old
yeah, Ronnie
guy,
Pascal.
who used to run it, was like, oh yeah, I could show you how to use a board and a few things. I was like, great. So I did that, and then I for free I found out later was did some grad show, and then the Backdoor Barbecue guys happened to be there, and they were like, "That was really good. Do you want to tech for us?" I was like, "Yes," and then that leads into
Oh, that's so funny. I thought
everything
you
else.
guys all knew each other before they even got together.
No, I
You
met
guys seem
them.
like such a good fit. Like you're all the same kind of like punk rock vibes, Like it's so funny. I thought you guys have been friends like way before they started Backdoor Barbecue.
No, I met them doing bad. I met Paul and like became like best buds with Paul over Newfound Glory, like
He's so great.
during a tech rehearsal, because I was playing Newfound Glory and he was like, "That they are my favorite band." I was like, "Oh well, we're gonna be best friends."
See, I mean, music really does bring people together. Like, I mean, I music's more like, I mean, I love lighting, but I think if I'm like my passion is definitely at music and what and how it can carry a piece, you know what I mean?
I do.
And the audience, it really keeps the audience alive. But also like artists bonding over music,
Oh
I
yeah,
find it very intimate.
no, absolutely. Like those are some core memories, especially like if you go back far enough. If you've been a fan of a band for that long. I also wanted to ask you: have you ever had like a really big like tech disaster happen to you in the middle of a show?
Oh my God. Oh yeah, yeah.
What was
Um,
that? What's that story? I'm
oh my God, I
curious.
tell this story all the time. I love it. It's so funny. Okay. So it was in high school. And this was before I had done any sketch comedy. I was just kind of like a fan of it, but I'd never really performed it. But I was like big into musical theater and
Mm-hmm.
theater in school. Um, and we were doing, so I'm from Maine, the
Uh huh.
whitest state in America, in America.
You're
And
you're from South Canada.
yeah, exactly. And for my junior year musical, our high school decided to do The Wiz, an
Oh
all-white
no.
production of The Wiz. Because how cute, like a fun soundtrack to the Wizard of Oz. And and it's so funny because like when I auditioned for it, I was like, oh my God, this music's amazing. Like I didn't know anything about the musical until
Uh-huh.
after I got the role of Ada Pearl. And I looked into it and I was like, oh no, we should not be
Not be
doing
do-
this musical. Why are we
what
doing
year
this
was this?
musical? 2003.
Okay.
It
So
was
we
the
were still
cusp
at
of wokeness, right? It was the
yeah,
cusp of
yeah, we were still like I think maybe a good 5 years before anybody had the thought of, "Hey, maybe that's not a great idea." But
yeah.
then I think we were still even a few years from that we started having like all white productions of In the Heights, and it's like
Yeah.
missing the
Oh,
point.
God, it takes all the meaning out of the work. You know what I mean? Like, otherwise, it's just like another whitewashing. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I love that
Mhm.
musical. I was so
Oh,
lucky
it's
to
great.
actually get that opportunity because I will never have that again.
Right.
But so Ada Pearl, she comes out in like the second or third number of the musical, and she's like big energy, right? It's like,
Yeah.
welcome to Oz, right? She's the
Hmm.
first kind of outlandish character. So during the during the process, the director was like, "Okay, we're gonna have you come out, and it's gonna be like big flashing lights, and like, and a fog machine's gonna go off, and it's gonna be like a big appearance, kind of like in The Wizard of Oz, like,
Yeah.
a big kind of like, yay!" And so, great, awesome. I come out to a musical number with a big fog effect. So, I get out on stage, and I start singing, and we do the scene, and the song, we're like halfway through the song, and there's this kind of dialogue sequence where it got kind of quiet, and the girl
Uh-huh.
that was sharing the stage with me as um oh my, Dorothy, her and I start to kind of catch each other, like start to realize our surroundings, because the strobe effect was still going
Uh-huh.
during this scene that should have been kind of like dampened at that time. And we could hear kind of in the distance like these like beep beep, like ree, ree, like alarms going off
Uh-huh.
outside of the theater, like just
Uh-oh.
in the hallways outside. And but we kept going. We were still doing the scene. It was very kind of an emotional moment too. And in comes the director and is like walking down the aisle like, stop the show, we all have to leave the theater right now. The firefighters are on their way because the alarms are going off, and we all have to evacuate this building. We were the only people in. It was a weekend, so like we were pretty much the only people in the high school.
Uh-huh.
But we had to stop the production,
In front of
leave
an
the stage
audience?
in front of an audience.
Oh my
So
God.
I was in high school. I was like this was my first big role that I was like, doing
Sure.
on stage. And so I just instantly break into tears. I'm like, I like, what are we gonna do? Because he was like, don't worry, we'll pick up where we left off. And I was like, how are we gonna pick up where we left off in the middle of a musical number? And he's like, like, anyway, it doesn't matter, and at least we're safe. But so they had forgotten to turn the alarms off, the fire
Mm-hmm.
alarms off for the smoke machine.
Oh, right.
So it all had to get cleared out. We spent like a half an hour getting it all cleared out, and they kept the alarms off. But then it was like time to start the show again. And he was like, we're going to just start from the top of the whole scene. You're just going to do it again. And I was like, do the whole thing again? What? And with no fog machine? Like that
Oh
was
my
like
God.
that was like the one thing I was like, the fog machine,
Right.
like stuck on.
It's
It
right.
wasn't
It's
that they had
essential to
seen,
everything.
yeah, it wasn't that they had already seen all the fun things and the surprises and like gotten kind of like an emotional reaction from us or whatever. It was because of that element. But then I was like, oh, maybe okay, there's a way to kind of make a joke about this. So I got a little board, like a little sign board
Hmm.
with a stick on it, and I wrote poof on it. And so when I came out on stage, I was just it was like a classic kind of like comedy move of like poof.
Yeah.
And they, like the whole audience just lost it. So that was a really fun kind of thing that came out of it, was like learning that you don't need those effects. You can just get around it by making a joke,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
imagine this. Use your imagination here. Poof.
Yeah.
So I loved that. That's something I'll always carry with me, that story of like the tech disaster.
Oh, that's that's great. I love everything about that. I once saw a play in Baltimore where there was a pretty essential prop to a scene get dropped and fall into the audience, and the actor just said, "Now imagine it's right here." And they just kind of, and the whole crowd was, of course, with it. But the
Oh,
big,
wait. I have a story like that too.
oh
And
yeah,
I did not just say, "Oh, imagine it's here," in character. I jumped off the stage, picked it up out of the pit, and jumped back up on the stage. I was doing a performance of Proof,
okay,
and I was playing Catherine, and there's the first like big emotional scene. She like grabs for the phone and calls 911. And so I grabbed the phone, and it was a wireless, and it flew out of my hand and skidded across the stage into the pit.
oh
And
no,
but I hadn't called 911 yet, and that's how the whole scene ends. So I was like, well, I guess I'll just justify that it was like in the garden, So I
hmm,
jumped down off stage and realized I was really bad at getting up on stage.
right,
So I don't know, maybe it was like those endorphins that moms get when they can lift a car off their baby, but I
sure,
like just jumped back on stage with the phone in hand. Because I was like too
hmm,
in it. I was not gonna be
yeah.
like, "Oh, cops," like I'm not gonna
Sure,
just
sure. Yeah, or just
pretend.
of course. I've had two, like, I had a huge nightmare happen to me at the old pit location once. And then when I was in college, I can't remember the name of the play, but me and the guy I was interacting with most in the scene were kind of like secret police, and we did this like bit where we like clink glasses while we're like talking to the main character. And one of the nights we clinked glasses too hard and they broke in our hands.
Ooh. Oh
Like
no.
real, like,
Did you get cut?
no, we nobody got
Okay.
hurt, luckily, but we definitely had to like explain our. Well, I think we just kind of barreled through it, but I almost was ready to say there is room for improvement, which would have made sense in the context of seeing. But at the old pit in the underground, Backdoor Barbecue was doing a show. I think it was like Wednesday or that was when we were still doing Wednesday, Thursdays nights. And this was before I like really knew all of what I was doing at the pit. So I didn't know that you should, if you're using a USB drive, you need to have the USB drive. And I also didn't know it's a great idea to put all of your assets onto the computer. So
Right.
the show starts, red X's,
Oh
every
no.
cue breaks. And the
Shoot.
first sketch is like super like sound effect and music dependent. So I had to basically rebuild the entire show
Oh yeah.
while the show was happening
Oh
and
man, I've been there.
still do it. Luckily, that was
Thank
when they
God for
still.
QLab 5 now.
Oh, what's that?
QLab 5 auto bundles now.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, so you don't have to worry about having the files on it. It automatically carries them over when you upload it to your USB.
Oh, that's nice. That's good to
Yeah.
know. I'm still definitely gonna put everything in my folder just to,
Oh yeah, yeah.
because I also had,
Because you might have to rebuild.
yeah,
I've had to
because
do that too. It
yeah,
sucks.
the computer crash recently. I had to go and rebuild an entire Love Is Live like the day of
Yep.
the show a few months ago.
Same.
Just everything. Like sometimes I start thinking, oh, it'll run smoothly, and every time I do that, it always bites me in the ass.
But it's great because, like, you do have that a bit of downtime in the booth to like, fix it,
Exactly. Like,
finagle it.
yeah,
As long as everything's set up, like,
yeah, piece together with like
projector wise.
duct tape and popsicle
Yeah,
sticks sometimes.
so funny.
So talking
Yeah.
about musicals, were you a musical theater person like in high school when you were growing up? Were you like the person like just belting out like classic show tune belts in the halls? Was that who you were?
I was okay, yes, I definitely was. I was a music theater kid, show choir, but I was also like a trombone player. So I I want to say I was aware of musicals, and like there was a time and a place for me, right? Cuz
Yeah,
I find music theater uh kind of I don't want to insult the community, but like there are definitely some tendencies. I guess people, you know, uh think that all the music theater kids are that way, loud and
hmm,
singing all the time. Um, I can be I can be roped into it, but I'm not one to like start that or initiate that.
sure.
Like there's a
I'm
time
the
and a
same
place.
way.
Backstage, I will sing along. I get hyped and excited and in rehearsal, obviously, but like I wasn't like in people's faces like, "Ah," you know.
Sure,
But around the right people you can be, and so I was very much a nerd, and actually I ended up going to school for music theater in college for music theater, so that even nurtured it even more. So I was it did feel the music theater community was very much my community, and I was in it, in that oeuvre all the time. So
hmm,
but when I came to the city, it just kind of like blew up even more to the point of like the ego was involved with it here, so
sure,
I kind of lost that passion of like sharing music theater that way through shared kind of like choral settings. I guess we sing along, because it then turned into this like I'm better than you, or look at what I can do kind of situation, where it's like
sure.
if you go to karaoke with a bunch of music theater kids, it's going to get annoying. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do, because you're just there to like have a good time, and then someone goes up there thinking that they're going to get an agent by being in the by
Exactly.
singing really well.
Exactly.
I understand that. It's almost like, because sometimes and I've found this in stand up as well, because I feel like especially the performers who get to New York, there's a lot of like former like I got the lead in every show in school kind of vibe, and
Yeah.
now everybody's sort of like doing the musical theater equivalent of like see how high I can jump, or how I can dunk, or how throw hard I can throw, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Or who I've worked with.
Oh no, totally. I mean, I can. There used to be a show at the Creek called Talk Show the Game Show, which you would get points for name dropping, and I would have excelled at that because I had so many like passing interactions with random famous people from 15 years in New York. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's something. It's what got to me was in the first year I was like auditioning, going on cattle call in the first year of living in New York City.
mhm,
After having gone to like a university in Maine, in University of Southern Maine, for a bachelor of music. Like
mhm,
it was a very focused musical degree, but I also got a theater minor. So like I kind of built my, it was a musical theater emphasis in a vocal performance degree,
right.
but I also got a theater minor. So I involved myself with like theater kids and music theater kids. So I got kind of a nice blend of like, you know, a
There's
blend
the
of
folks.
sanity. Yeah,
Sure,
some
yeah.
people are
The folks who are always on, and then the folks who are just like, I'm very
chill.
serious. I'm doing my
Yeah, yeah.
Meisner.
Exactly. Yeah, it's about like always being on. I think that's where I found it really exhausting. And then like coming to the city and being in a room at like 5 a.m. with a bunch of strangers that are like, "Oh, Daniel, we worked together like a year ago in Summerstock. Remember that?" And it's like, it's like all this screaming and just like look at everybody, look at us, we've done it, you know what I mean? Like I don't know, there was
Yeah,
just this kind of like pretentiousness that I couldn't handle that early, and like it just was not my cup of tea to like be pursuing that side of the business, because
right.
that's the business. You have to be in that room all the time. That's your job. It's not about the
Yes.
show. You gotta like get the show.
No, yeah, and
And
the
so
whole
I just
technique
wasn't
of
ready.
auditioning. Yeah. No,
I
I
wanted to just
understand
create
that.
my own stuff.
No,
But
that's
anyway,
kind of
sorry, you
what.
were
Oh no, I agree with you. I agree with you, Slaney. That's sort of like I have a very low tolerance for sort of like the political machinations or games that you have to play in order to get somewhere. I'm much more like putting my energy into like you're saying, like just doing my own things and then seeing what that brings me.
It's so much more like, I don't know, soul soulful to me. There's just something more connected when you're like doing your own stuff, making your own, even like on a building a cabaret, like you're
Yeah.
using songs that you have in your repertoire, but you're creating the story in between it. You're creating the flow and like the meaning, and you're saying something. It's not just someone else's work. It does kind of transfer into your own work. And that's why I found the comedy community, because I was then able to, I mean, let's be honest, I was able to be on stage
Yeah.
regularly, which
Mm-hmm.
is somewhere that I long to be, not
Yes.
for not for attention, but just like creating something with someone in in front of an audience. I find that just
Yes.
exhilarating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so uh when I found that, it was a total pivot, but I was still able to use all of the things that I learned in high school and college to then learn a new skill, like I said, like a new improv, and then I moved into sketch, and it became so much more rewarding to me than trying for a role that someone else had created and that millions of people have done before, and then like trying to make it my own. I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to like, I liked being able to originate my own stuff.
Yeah, well, you're certain. Well, because doing that, you're so like much more invested in it from like the very beginning of
Yeah.
the process. And I especially feel like in comedy, especially sketch comedy now, I feel like music is it's almost like a prerequisite now because I feel like there's a hilarious song in lots of sketch shows I go to at the Pit or some sort of music bit. They do funny songs on Saturday Night Live every week
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
especially if they have like a singer who hosts,
Uh-huh.
like Ariana
Yeah,
Grande or
I was just watching that actually. It came up on my feed, the espresso parody with Domingo. So
yeah,
funny.
the Domingo parody. Or my other favorite one from last year was they did like a pop country song when Nate Bargatze hosted the first time,
Oh
like
yeah.
about lake beaches and what it's like hanging out at a lake beach, which is so dead on because I did that a bunch growing up in Maryland.
Yeah.
So I feel like having those. I feel like music is like there's what's the best way I want to phrase this? It's essentially like that's the new triple threat that I think a lot of people want to be. You know
Mm. Like musical sketches, you're saying.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's act funny music. That's what you need now.
Yeah, I mean, I get so much inspiration from music, and that's why I pursued it in college, and so to be able to incorporate that into the work I'm doing now with sketch comedy is like a dream. So I do tend to write inspired, or like keep in mind things that like an outro song, like
Hmm.
that might kind of work in tandem with the idea. So it's fun to like come up with that. Oh, and also, so I've been working with college radio,
Uh huh.
with Andrea Romano's piece. She produces at the Pit, and I love that idea because she goes into it with a playlist of like a genre, or like an actual like a musician or some, or usually a genre type or a time period of music. Um, and then we all get inspired and write sketches based on songs or the artists, and
Uh
so it
huh.
always becomes a very musical show, and I think that people find that very exciting to see, because also it's impressive because it takes more rehearsal than a normal sketch. You have to rehearse the music on top of the lines and the blocking,
Yeah.
so it's just more impressive, I think.
Oh, absolutely. You're essentially like doing like a little a play essentially in a very
Yeah.
concentrated amount of time, and a
Yeah.
musical at that.
Yeah.
For sure. I wanted to ask you, so like vocal performance with a concentration in musical theater, are there specific differences between the way you would sing a song musical theater like versus how you would just sing it to sing it? Like what are the
Mhm.
differences in technique with musical theater and then like just regular singing?
Yeah, so with my concentration, it also was paired with classical singing.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where the bass starts. It's kind of like for a dancer, you start in ballet so that you
Mhm.
get like the technique and the bass kind of understanding of your voice and your range and how to utilize vowel placement and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, when you're approaching a music theater piece, it's all about the style of the piece. So there you could range from pop to country to um, the classic kind of like showy, you know,
Mhm. Like
um,
kind of stuff.
right. Well, that's more pop. Steven Schwartz definitely got started that kind. Well, I can't say start. I can't say he started it, but when Wicked came out, I was in college and it was like a huge moment in music theater where I was like, oh, this is so like I have such a cynical mind. So I was like very much like, oh, this is so campy and like silly and like look at them. And also I was a fan of the book. So I was
Mhm.
also like, oh, this is like a really watered down version of the book. For it's like a family friendly version of Wicked. They're like
Right.
kind of destroying it. but but I also am obsessed with like I would literally do a one woman Wicked if I had the opportunity because I
That would be
loved the
good.
soundtrack. I loved all of it. And so I even like got pulled over once on my way home from college, like late at night. I was driving home because I went to college in Portland, grew up in Bar Harbor, and they're like 3 hours away from each other. So I
Right.
would leave after classes and try to stay awake driving. And so I put on Wicked and I was singing Defying Gravity. I was like belting Defying Gravity at the top of my lungs, like driving up the highway. Didn't realize I was going 100 miles an hour because
Oh
I was so
no.
invested in this song.
Oh,
I got pulled over. And so luckily he wrote,
and now you have a cop knocking on your window and they just hear it's time to try to and he's just comes in and is
this
like,
was the
ma'am, you
part
cannot
where it's
defy the
like,
law.
Elphaba. Yeah, no,
Oh,
this is the
right.
part where it's like, listen to me. Just say you're sorry. You know, like
Right.
it's that kind of like lull moment and it's on
Uh-huh.
under I'm still sort of singing along to it. But I
Right.
definitely used Defying Gravity as the excuse for why I was going that fast and didn't realize it. And he
Uh-huh.
was like, and of course I was crying. And he was like, well, I mean, I guess I could write you down to 75, which is criminal speeding, and you won't like lose your license. You'll just have to pay like $300 for this ticket. And I was like, thank you,
Oh,
and
that
then
that
just
that was
blasted the wizard and I or something.
oh, that's nice of that. I have definitely done that as well. I've never gotten pulled over like blasting musical theater, but I am like a serious Ren head, so I definitely had times like blasting like Another Day because that song always makes me
Right.
tear up like every time I hear it. Like just
Yeah.
something about the melody and like the emotions of like Rogers like cannot get out of his own way at that point in the
Yeah.
show.
Right.
I always just react to that very strongly. So I definitely have had times like listening to that with like just again tears, and then it's like I'm
Yeah.
just like I'm really glad no one else is here to see this.
It's so funny though with Rent, like Rent was the big musical that like first came out when I was in high school that like it was edgy and like we were all kind of like
Yes.
allowed to talk about sex and drugs and stuff
Uh huh.
like in high school. And so that was playing backstage uh during most of the musicals we did. Like we that was like our pump up kind of like everybody can agree on Rent for
Yes.
the background music of like getting ready for another show,
Uh huh.
like we all can agree that this is the show that's going to warm us up and get us all into this like creative field of play, you know? Um,
I absolutely do know that. I'm trying to think. I have a couple of funny Rent stories. My old college, got in trouble for their production of Rent by trying to change the ending against Musical
what?
Theater International's rules.
Oh no, what? Wh-
Well, so my old professor, who I did have as a director for a couple plays, I was in her production of The Adding Machine, which is very surrealist. And part of our rehearsals for that, she would make us do various yoga poses while hitting a kendo stick on the ground uh, to change between each pose. And then she would also like have us sing "My Country 'Tis of Thee" at random times doing these yoga poses. So
Interesting.
probably you probably can't do that now. Um, if I was just
Well,
if I
not my
was just
country,
guessing,
'tis of thee.
right? Political, but essentially they tried to change it so it Angel, not Angel, Mimi doesn't come back. She just kind of dies, and then we go
Disappears.
into the finale. There's no
Oh,
like she's back moment, and
oh,
Musical Theater International was like after the first performance was like you got to change it back or you can't do it. Uh,
wow. Yeah, I mean, they protect that piece.
they
They
as well they
since day
should.
one, since
Oh,
premiere day one.
and I understand completely. If I had lost if someone in my family had made something like that and lost them,
Oh,
I'd view it as their legacy too, and be very protective of
yeah,
it. So
yeah.
that's one. I've never been in Rent, but it is my one dream in musical theater. One day,
Oh,
one
yeah.
one day. I don't know what the
One day
context is.
more.
I don't know what the context is because I would definitely need a vocal coach, but I feel like I could pull off. I feel like I can hit Mark Cohen vocal range. Those are
Okay.
relatively. I'm manifesting because with you right now, Slaney. So
Also, honestly, this is also why I went to sketch, right? Because like I
mhm.
was able to put myself in that dream role. You can do it.
Yes,
You can just write yourself in and put it up on a stage and get that dream made, you know? Like
yes. To me,
someday I
that's.
want to
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, well, like just because someday I want to be like Mama Rose in Gypsy, but I'm not there yet. So until then, I'm gonna sing it in a parody or like in another setting and justify it on stage.
I that's to me that's very punk rock, which is something that I understand and apply to a lot of different things. The idea of a system or somebody in an audition room saying, "Well, you're not there yet, but then you can go and do it at our small little theater above a Korean
A
place."
sushi place. Exactly. That was the joke I made too in a college radio show. I did a Newsies sketch where I died doing Newsies. Um, like I tried a triple axel and it went awry. And so I was a ghost haunting the theater, and it's because I had unfinished business because I never got to play Mama Rose, so I
Uh
never
huh.
got to sing Rose's turn. So the God mic was the like voice, right? Like
Hmm.
just look to the light, like trying to guide me out of this purgatory. And like so I got to not only be in Newsies, but wrote myself a moment of Rose's turn, and then like like passed on into the into the heavens. So it was very cathartic because I'll probably never be in Newsies.
Oh,
Actually, I
that.
can tell you right now, I will never be in Newsies.
I feel like in a few years people are going to be like, "What's a newspaper?" This is
Right.
very method
I know.
kind of. I'm even feeling that feeling. Well, my other thought I had on Rent is now that it's sort of like a period piece because kids today have no concept of what New York in the '90s was like. But more and more of my friends are starting to side with Benny as they become like older. So
Right.
suddenly they are like,
Pay the rent.
he's being very reasonable. But that means they also have to co-sign is like, it's not unreasonable for him to ask them to pay your rent. And they'll be like, no, but then this also means that you're okay with him cheating on his wife with like a teenager who's HIV positive and probably not telling her that. So
Yeah.
do you sign off on that too? If so, questionable morals. Questionable.
I know they I thought they were gonna do like a musical, like, I mean, it's not as extreme as the AIDS crisis, but when I moved to the city, it was like Occupy Wall Street. So like it just
Uh-huh.
felt very emboldened, and it was like a young like it felt very Rent to me. You know what I mean? Like it was
Uh-huh.
like, whoa, cool. Like they're all edgy and standing up for, like against the man, and that's kind of how I pictured New York anyway. So it was kind of a funny, like I knew it was not that, but I, in my music theater brain, kind of like romanticized it
Uh-huh.
like as if I was in the mix of something that was going to be turned into a Rent someday, but no one's done that. It didn't go as far as they hoped it would have.
Yeah, it didn't. We haven't adapted it yet in any form, but not too similar because I did go down there when the occupation in Zuccotti Park was happening, and there was a similar sort of like '90s grunginess to it,
Yeah.
with like lots of like squatters and punk rock types, lots of activist
Uh-huh.
types, the People's Library, um,
It was
the
performance art. It was like people were renting out,
mhm. uh, yeah, like I ran into like the two lead singers of one of my favorite bands now. The lead singer got canceled, but they were there. So it was like
What's the band? Or do
uh,
you not want to say?
I'll tell you after
Okay.
after we finish up here, but because
Doesn't that suck? It's so hard to separate the art from the artist.
I know it's and I do it like on case by case basis, but lots of the music ones really I can't.
Yeah,
Again,
it sucks.
I'll tell you more of that later. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about musical theater, you were talking about cabaret. So I always thought cabarets was essentially a concert with like music theater standards or like pop standards. I didn't
Mhm.
realize cabaret was like you putting together essentially a show where the songs tell the story. Is that what cabaret is? It sounds like that's what you were describing.
So, I mean, that was my approach to it. I always like to kind of find a narrative
Mm-hmm.
and piece it together and create a story, like a through line.
Uh-huh.
I've done my own solo cabaret shows like twice, where I've put together my repertoire and justified it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
created moments that I could then kind of um either banter or monologue through to the next moment, which is music theater, right? You like take when there are no more words to say,
Yeah.
you then sing it. So I try to find that like emotional arc through it, and I mean, that's really storytelling too. So that's kind of, it was like a canvas for me, like a bit of a quilting piece, an approach to piecing all of my stuff together to
Mm-hmm.
make this piece. And I really, it was fun. It was like really creative to me. And then I also like would learn new songs on top of that. But no, so cabaret can be just people getting up and singing like two songs, or like whatever's in there, whatever they want to sing, and it's separate artists, or it's one person's cabaret.
Mm-hmm.
But for a solo cabaret performer, they kind of go at it with a theme, or something they want you to leave with, some sort of
I
meaning
see.
to the piece. It's not necessarily just like sing through my book, but if that's the gimmick, then you're there to see them just sing through their book. But for the most part, cabaret can really be crafted a way a musical is. But no, technically, like cabaret is just songs, random songs that don't
Got it.
really have a connection to each other.
Got it.
Um,
I see. Yeah, I was just curious. Maybe I've
oh, and
been misinterpreting cabaret the whole time.
I also forgot to mention, because you asked me about like the technical approach to music theater singing.
Yes.
Um, so so yeah, you get the bass, and I actually really loved learning about vocal pedagogy, because it's like how you take care of your voice. And it also like teaches you how to sing healthily. Like the reason Adele had so many issues was because she was not like a vocally trained singer. She was
Mm-hmm.
just singing like hard on her larynx, and it was doing damage, right?
Yeah.
So there are ways to approach because of the fact that the singers are doing it 8 times a week in
Right.
music theater. You have to sing a certain way, and so it sounds a certain way as opposed to pop or something more intimate in the sound booth like a recording artist would do. They're able to be more, like a smaller, there can be a smaller sound when you're in a a booth, a recording
Right.
booth.
Yeah.
You don't have to project, you don't have to like fill a room. And
Hmm.
so it can have a different style and a bit of breathiness. And that was what I had to overcome when I was coming out of high school. I mean, I was taking vocal lessons in high school,
Hmm.
and I I had this breathiness that like it's all about breath support and
Yeah.
how the air moves on your vocal cords. And so I was trying to overcome that. And it's funny because the style at that time was very pop and like very, but
Yeah.
also very like classic belty, like big numbers. You gotta like go really like, Jason Robert Brown was like writing some like really big pieces, and it was just like very very showy vocally.
Yeah.
And so it was like it felt it was you're training, you're like an athlete, training a muscle.
Yeah.
And so the approach to music theater in school was finding that health, though. Like they never wanted to push me so that I was like hurting my voice and damaging it. It
Hmm.
was like a slow progression to where I was able to find a mix in my register that sounds like a belt, so that you can produce the sound that is like that big brassy showiness
Yeah.
without doing the damage that does over time. Um, because if you're going to sing it like 8 times a week, you you can't rest. There's no rest. There's no rest for the wicked.
Exactly. I think somebody's at my door. I'll be right back.
I
I'm so
heard a
sorry.
little ding dong.
Be right back.
Okay, I'll just sing my one woman wicked.
Sorry about that. That's why
Oh, it's okay.
I love podcasting. I'll make a little note to edit around that.
I heard a little thing and I was like, I thought he was alone. Oh no. Someone's in the apartment.
The call's coming from inside the house. It's just this the thrill of a homemade operation here. Not too dissimilar to crafting shows for ourselves and at the pit. Like there's a certain like sort of homebrew quality that I like when stuff like that happens.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me
Oh man.
ask you this. So a lot of the technique is in order to like preserve through repetition because you have to do it so many times a week. So naturally you have to sing in a way that is not going to put as much strain on your vocal cords because if you lose your voice, then you can't do the show, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, definitely some people are equipped with an amazing instrument where they can, like rock and roll singers, they can do it.
Yeah.
They can do that. But it's also songs that they've written for themselves, and that they're like their band is able to kind of cover.
Yeah.
And again, like there is an approach where it may sound like they are like just like blowing the roof off, but it
Yeah.
might just be some mic work, where
Hmm.
they've got this crazy placement that rings through the mic and it's just like very powerful. Um, so it really is, it's a lot about technique. And so you have to approach each different style with a different technique. And music theater changed so much after I got out of college, where it became kind of a little, there was like a bit of like a folk movement with like Spring Awakening
Yeah.
and um, Bridges Over Madison County and like Light in the Piazza was kind of more like opera, like classical operatic and stuff. And so
Hmm.
I was equipped for like maybe Light in the Piazza, but like I had worked so hard to not have that breathiness anymore that I was like, what's going on?
Right. Right.
Like now I kind of wasn't able to sing the way that now all these roles are being,
Uh-huh.
what is being called for. So it's funny because like it goes through so many changes. You just have to be true to yourself. But it was always like a challenge for me to come up with different voices, and I actually really enjoy vocal work and performing that way, and like finding different timbres and qualities to every character,
Mm-hmm.
um I do an impression of Tom Waits. uh
I was just thinking about singers who have that like gravelly
yeah,
sort of voice, or
yeah, yeah,
like heavy metal where you're doing that like raw Cookie Monster
yeah.
thing.
And so I'll do a show as Tom Waits, an hour-long show. And I was doing it before the pandemic. I wrote like this musical, a jukebox musical using his songs, and
Cool.
created an evening that kind of all of the characters that he had built in his world were coming out of the woodwork and like
Mm-hmm.
interacting with him. And it like it was really fun to do. Don't tell him because I didn't pay him any rights.
No, I know he gets pretty intense on that stuff. I'm just
But
this is a
I
brilliant idea. I love this.
yeah, I really I enjoyed. So I wrote a musical, and then I adapted it for. I wrote Tom Waits for Christmas, and then the next year I got sick the week of that show, so I adapted it for Valentine's Day. I did it a couple months later, Tom Waits for Love, and like it kind of worked out. It worked out perfectly, actually.
Uh-huh.
A fine step, and then like a month later we went into lockdown, so then I wasn't doing shows as him, but I came back and I realized like the people that I was casting are improvisers. They didn't want to learn my lines. They just wanted to improvise. So I built a show where I was able to showcase myself as Tom Waits. I'm doing like a monologue and a song, and then I go into this world where I've mapped it onto a movie that I like want to like I want to see him in this like genre. So I've
Uh-huh.
done and I it's kind of like a portmanteau. It's just an excuse to have a a bit of a
Sure.
pun. But I've done The Hateful Weights as a play on The Hateful Eight,
Amazing.
um, Pie Weights of the Caribbean, and most recently A Waitsmare on Elm Street. And so it's just very fun. Like also I was a tech, so I was like,
Yeah.
that's my instrument, like that's his instrument in the show.
Yes.
He's he's become an improviser now.
Uh-huh.
Like, Tom Waits is like a man of many qualities and abilities. So why not try this new this new venture into improv? And so, you know, it started that way, but it's kind of grown into just like him being a Where's Waldo.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, back to the technique of it all. I don't know how to do his voice like he does it. You know what I mean? Like I could not
Right.
produce his sound, but for me, I try to produce it as healthily as I can. But I really can only do it like every other month, an hour-long show for every other month, because it afterwards it hurts for a few days, and I don't want it to be my Victor Victoria moment where I like end up with polyps on my like Julie Andrews lost her voice because she did Victor Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I would love to do Victor Victoria, but it's a bit of a cursed show because you're singing in a man's register, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to like um produce sound on a lower part of your voice that like hormonally is not supported the way that men are supported. So it
Yeah.
does do damage, and I feel like I've definitely done damage to my voice doing Tom Waits. But at the same time I'm like, whatever, it's just helping my like grit for my belt when I'm older, like maybe it will kind of add some color to my
Yeah,
my
give your voice
voice.
some character. Can
Yeah.
I've got to pitch I got to pitch something to you because I feel like this Tom Waits thing has some legs because I just like the idea of that distinct voice singing different things. I like the
Yeah.
idea. Like I just kept hearing him like singing Sabrina Carpenter in my head,
Yeah,
where he's
right.
just like, "Hang about me, baby.
Every
Oh,
night. Oh, is
isn't
that
that
me?
sweet?
I guess so.
I guess so." that
And he's
kind of
like
show
banging
doesn't
on pipes. Yeah, he's like,
right. It's just like
Yeah, there's like a saw in the back and
Yeah,
like chains.
yeah. You could turn hot to go into like a almost like a work song, like
What's he doing in
H-O
there? Yeah.
T-T-O-G-O.
Yes, exactly. I know.
um,
Maybe he should do a collection. He should do a cabaret. Okay, I'll do a cabaret as Tom Waits, where he does a bunch of pop songs.
I think this is a great idea. Um, what I also want to ask you, and I love to we're manifesting some of my ideas earlier, but what I also like to ask people, is there something you want to create that you haven't done yet? Is there another musical that you have in you somewhere that hasn't been written yet? What's something
Oh,
you want to do that you haven't done?
yes. Um, well, aside from I'm kind of like in waiting, right, for I coined the phrase mom ingenue.
Uh huh.
I'm in waiting to do all these mom ingenue roles that are like on Broadway, right?
Uh
The
huh.
Light in the Piazza, the mom from Light in the Piazza, Grey Gardens, Gypsy, Baker's Wife, which I should probably get on now,
Right. Right.
before I age out of it. But there are a bunch of like, especially Sondheim, he has such great roles. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a goal of mine, is to get back into music theater that way. But now it would be a different approach, right? I
Right.
would have to, I would have to work on who I know. I would have to do that networking shit that I
The
hate.
business and shit,
Yeah, I'd
and
have to
you'd
show
probably
up
be
at
have
5
to
a.m.
yeah, you'd have to be making reels, have to get like
Ugh. Well, that was
30,000
another thing, was
followers.
like coming out of college, YouTube was just starting. No
Hmm.
one knew that like it was going to be all a visual endeavor, right? And a visual uh real submissions, like we were
Hmm.
just recording our song, our concerts and our our performances. We weren't doing video recordings. We were just doing audio recordings.
Right.
So I had nothing to submit when they started asking for like video proof of me doing all this work.
Yeah.
So that was kind of something that held me back. And now I do feel like maybe I've accumulated enough stuff visually to like put together that type of reel.
Yeah.
I just hate that that's the reality we live in, but whatever. It is a good tool, especially as a director and a producer. It's very helpful to just be like, yeah, like you don't have to waste time in a room. But
Hmm.
I think next steps, I would definitely like to go into like film production and like work towards um, either a short film or a full screenplay. Like I've always just kind of, I the thing is for me, it's I have these ideas of doing work that would actually be just very vulnerable, and
Hmm.
I'm the goal of mine actually for 2024. My New Year's resolution was to try stand up for the first time.
Uh-huh. How'd that
I've
go?
never done stand up. It's November 22nd. Still haven't done it.
Okay, so we're coming down to the
So
wire here.
yeah, I've got about a month where I can live up to that resolution. But the thing is, it's hard for me to be vulnerable and like
Hmm.
on stage, especially in front of people I know. So the stand up that I watch, and I watch a lot of stand up. I love stand up because people are being vulnerable, they're being real, and they
Yeah.
have stuff to talk about, right? Like what am I going to talk about? My parents are still together. I don't go to therapy. I'm not on any dating apps.
Well,
So
that
that's
is
my opener.
right. Well,
I'm
that
a
is
white woman that's living in New York City. Like, what am I going to talk about?
I mean, that is a big hurdle to it. And I similarly, because I started doing stand up in college, and I that is one way to do it. And there is a certain level of like the joke writing ability versus how vulnerable you are. Like the joke writing makes the more vulnerable stuff work better.
Hmm.
But you can work up to that if you just
Yeah.
once you do that first like 5 minute set, and if it even if it doesn't go well, you will have not died, and then that makes getting into doing the work a lot less terrifying.
Yeah.
I could tell you something, and I'm not trying to mansplain comedy to you because I know that you know. I know you know comedy very well. This is just one particular thing where I have some knowledge in. Uh, but something my TA in my comedy class in college said is people like when you start talking about what you do, you can talk about your family, you can talk about your friends, talk about your job, and then I also just liked sort of like quirky observational
Hmm.
one-liners, which is which is who you are, and maybe that's a way
Yeah,
to be funny without
it's
having to
true.
like splay yourself open and like.
I do, yeah, I do like that. Like I like on Facebook, and I mean, for I tried Twitter a little bit, but it never really landed as much. But like I'll respond in a kind of like with vague posts to what's going on. So some people will get it, some people won't. Like
Mhm.
what's going on in the world or anything. Like some people are dialed in that way, and so I like it because like it's not it gets the right audience, and I'm not like reaching. And if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. So I'm kind of
Mhm.
already conditioned for stand up that way, where like some people
Yeah.
are going to get it and some people won't. But I do like writing one liners. But it doesn't feel vulnerable because I'm just commenting on what everybody else is commenting on. So it's more just like my take on things, which is definitely a way to go. But I want to
Mhm.
build. I do want to challenge myself at some point in my life to write about those vulnerable things and like occurrences in my life. Um, but you don't want to hurt others. You don't want to like call people out, and so
Sure.
it's tough because I keep relationships with people who have hurt me in the past, you know,
Mhm.
and so I don't want them to think that I uh, am harboring any resent. I mean, I am.
Right.
I
Well, that's
am,
a good
but
place
I
to
don't want.
that's a good place to start. I don't want to harbor resentment, but I am. Here's what I resent. Not a bad place to start.
So I do have, I have stories to tell. It's just like when and where is the right time to do it. I'll
Time and
find,
place, like we were saying earlier.
yeah, I'll find the right time and place. It's it I think it would just be more cathartic for me if anything, and maybe I would just need a pen name or something, where I can hide
Mhm.
under a bit of a veil of anonymous uh
Yeah, you
situation.
could have like an edgy stage name like Slay J or something like that.
Yeah, no one's gonna put that together.
or Seal, since your last name is Rose, you could do like da 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 da
Yeah,
da da.
kissed by a rose.
Um, well, Slaney, I I've really enjoyed getting to chat with you for this past hour, and
I
I'm
know it's so nice.
optimistic. I'm optimistic for your stand up debut. I know that
Oh, thank
I know you
you.
have it within you, and I will look forward to seeing you around the pit. Is there anything we
Thank
can
you.
plug before we get out here?
Ooh, yes. So I'm currently writing and performing in Febster, which is a
Love them.
great sketch show. Yeah, Katie Massart and Matt Ziegler. They are producing at the Pit on December 7th at, I want to say 8 o'clock. Um, Let me just double check.
Oh yeah,
December
totally. And I'll put
7th at 9 o'clock. December 7th at 9 o'clock. And then right after that, there's a theater sports that I produce. It's a improv short form game show that two short form improv teams come together and compete. It's really fun. Three judges get to decide, and it's very low stakes but very fun. And then my Tom Waits show. Look out for it on February 7th, Friday, February 7th at 10 p.m. at the
awesome.
Pit. We're doing Can't Hardly Waits.
That sounds excellent. I'll have ticket links in the description, and I hope those go well. Thanks for doing the show, Slaney.
Thanks for having me, Will. It's great talking to you like without bar noise and music and theater happening. Like it's fun to be able to
Exactly.
just focus in and get to know you.
Yeah, in like 10-minute spurts. No, yeah, this is what I love doing the show is like it's like because like I think I know you, but do I really? And now I feel like I can say I do. So this has been great.
Yeah,
Thank you again.
what a pleasure.
I love sitting down with other funny people, especially on the show when we start like getting into riffs and fun ideas. It's very fun to do that with stand-up comedians and as well as improvisers because you just start like going off and building off of like very funny, silly ideas. And I don't get to do that in regular adult conversation very often. So a true treat to sit and chat with Slaney. I'll have links in the description for her next shows as well as her Instagram if you want to go check her out. You can also check out the new episodes of the Hallmark After Show podcast, the holiday podcast I do with my wife Chelsea. We've put out, I think, at least 7 or 8 new episodes, including a bonus episode talking about Netflix's The Noel Diaries this week. So make sure you go and check that out as well. That's our show for today. If you enjoyed this podcast and know a friend who would be interested in it as well, you can send them to awesomedisaster.com. That is awesomedisaster.com. That has links to everywhere you can get the podcast. I am willcarry23 on Instagram, and I'm Between Awesome and Disaster on Instagram as well. If you want to go a little bit further in support of the show, you can also check out our Patreon as well as our merch shop as well. Again, everything is at awesomedisaster.com. And I really appreciate your support this year. I know that I did not have an episode a week this year. So I appreciate everybody who is still with me. And I resolve to continue to be productive and to continue to create and make new things, which is what I do here in New York City. And that is the only dream I've ever had, is to be an artist in New York. And sometimes and especially I like to remember that, especially, you know, if there's times when the world as a whole gets me down. I am in the middle of living a dream, and I'm very excited about that. So thank you for being a part of that, and I will see you next week between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.